Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Penetration Podcast, where we talk about all things self-esteem, dating, and thriving as your most authentic self. I'm Danny, your self-esteem and dating coach for gay and bisexual men, and today we are diving into a topic that just about, in my opinion, everyone can relate to, and that is rebuilding your confidence after a breakup. So let's be real about something, right? Breakups suck. There's no other way of putting it. You lose sleep, your appetite goes haywire, you second guess yourself, everything reminds you of them, and sometimes you act completely out of character. And for some of you, that might look like stalking your ex's social media, right? Texting them late at night, right after a few drinks, or secluding yourself from the world. But the point being is that the process of overcoming a breakup looks different for every single person, for every single one of you. But the fact still remains, it's a painful process. But here's the thing. While breakups can feel like the end of the world, they're also an opportunity, a chance to rebuild, to reframe, and to come back even stronger. So today, we are talking about how to do that. So stick around because I've got some actionable tips for you. I've got a bit of tough love, and maybe even some stats that will blow your mind. So let us get into it, right? So, okay, let's start talking about why breakups mess with your self-esteem in the first place, right? And it's not just about losing someone you care about. It's about losing the version of yourself you were when you were with them, right? When you're in a relationship, your identity often becomes tied to being with your partner, to sharing a life with that person, to building routines and habits and all these different things. You're not just you. You are also us. So when a breakup happens, it can feel like, who am I now? Right? Plus, let's not forget how rejection can also hit your ego. And interestingly enough, I'm going to pull it up right here. There was a survey from Match.com that found that 71% of people experience a significant drop in self-esteem after a breakup, right? It's human nature to wonder, what's wrong with me? Why wasn't I enough? But here's the thing. Most of the time, it's not about you. And I know that sounds really harsh, especially if you were the person who is currently experiencing the breakup or have experienced a breakup before. Relationships end for all kinds of reasons, right? There's incompatibility, there is timing, there's personal growth that sometimes has to be done before you can be in a healthy, successful relationship. And sometimes people leave not because you're not good enough, but because they're not ready for what you have to offer. That being said, and here's the tough love part, right? Sometimes you have to look in the mirror and reflect on your contribution to the breakup to learn from it and curb your bad behaviors. And let's be clear, in no way am I saying it is your fault. I just want to be clear about that, right? I don't know what happened in your relationship to result in the breakup, and you very well cannot be at fault for the situation or what happened, but every relationship takes two to tango. Did you allow behaviors that were less than favorable because you preferred to be in a relationship rather than to just be single, right? Were you afraid of being alone? Therefore, you flexed on your personal boundaries. There are a host of questions you can ask yourself, but it's important that you ask yourself the right ones. And I know in a situation that involves a breakup, you don't always know the right questions to ask. So let's break down some steps that you can take, right? So self-compassion is a really, really big thing. And this is something that I talk to all the time with my clients when it comes to building self-esteem and self-confidence and getting through a breakup. The first step, essentially, what's the first step in your confidence comeback, right? And feeling like yourself again. And that's always self-compassion. And I know what you're thinking. Self-compassion, what does that even mean? What does that have to do with anything? I am compassionate. I am a compassionate person, and I understand all that. So I wanted to break it down a little bit so you understand it. Self-compassion is treating yourself like you would a good friend. If your best friend came to you post-breakup saying, I feel so unlovable, I don't know how I'm ever going to be in a relationship with anybody again who's ever going to want to love me, would you say to them, yeah, you're right, not going to happen? Of course not. You'd remind them of all the reasons they are amazing. So why don't you do that for yourself? Why don't we do that for ourselves? There is a doctor by the name of Kristen Neff, who is a leading researcher on self-compassion. And essentially what she found is that people who practice it are less likely to experience prolonged periods of low self-esteem. And in her studies, her studies suggested that self-compassion reduces negative self-talk and increases resilience. And resilience is key here because bouncing back isn't about avoiding pain. It's about moving through it. This is such an important lesson to learn. It's normal to want to avoid pain, right? I'm not saying that it's not. Absolutely normal. I mean, most people I speak to anyways, including myself, don't enjoy being in pain. But here's the issue. If you avoid the pain, you are conditioning yourself to be avoidant when things become difficult or emotionally uncomfortable. Every relationship has conflict to varying degrees, some healthy, some not. If you avoid working through conflict in your relationship, you begin to create an emotional wedge between you and your partner, which often results in a breakup. You become the driver of your own self-sabotaging vehicle that results in the very pain you are trying to desperately avoid. And I say these things because I have experienced them myself as well. I have experienced many versions of heartbreak in my life. The divorce of my parents, the loss of my grandmother, who was, in my opinion, my soulmate, and what I would consider to be the other half of my heart, the ending of a 13-year relationship, and several other examples I won't talk about on this podcast because I can talk about it forever and get into it. And I think, obviously, as an example, I can provide this for you, but it's not conducive to the rest of this episode. So why do I mention this, right? I learned after some time and some life experiences that avoiding the uncomfortable feelings, it just prolongs the pain, right? And in fact, when my grandmother passed away, I avoided the feelings. I did not want to confront them at all. And interestingly enough, I'm usually a person who's totally fine with confronting those uncomfortable feelings. But for some reason, that situation in particular, I wasn't able to process it. I just had to emotionally avoid the entire thing. And that avoidance resulted in physical symptoms. And it would manifest every single year around the anniversary of her death. And I would always end up in the hospital with symptoms of like a heart attack. Like I always had pressure in my chest. I always felt really weird. I felt off. And after the third year of this happening, I remember this so clearly. The ER doctor that was attending me noticed in my chart that this was a pattern. And he actually recommended that instead of coming to the hospital, that I should go to therapy to work through whatever trauma I had experienced, because this is something that he has seen before with people who experienced some form of emotional trauma. After my breakup with my girlfriend of 13 years, I started also having similar physical issues, and it developed into severe tics due to mismanaged stress and anxiety and depression. And these are things that I don't usually talk about, but I think in order for us to be able to connect, and in order for me to ask of you to be vulnerable, I also have to be vulnerable. So, I think sometimes it's so easy to sit on a podcast episode like this and kind of preach about what we feel should be done and the steps that should be taken and all of these things, but we don't take into account our own personal issues, the things that we've had to manage, the things that we've had to overcome as well. So when I talk to you guys about these things, it's not just because I'm sitting here doing research and reading and then just reiterating what I read. It's also based off of my own personal experiences with these things and things that I've done to overcome a lot of these situations. So that being said, I avoided the emotions around the breakup. So this was me once again avoiding things. And those physical symptoms, those tics, was my body's way of telling me I was not dealing with the pain. So at 33 years old, I finally decided to work through the pain instead of trying to go around it. So here is, I don't know if this sounds like a really weird transition, but it made me think of an exercise that I want you guys to do. And the reason why I want you to do this is because this is also something that I did for myself when I was trying to process some negative thoughts and some negative emotions. So the first thing that I want you to do is I want you to write down the negative thoughts you're having about yourself. You don't have to do it right now. This is something that you can do later. You want to make sure that you are in an environment that is distraction-free, where you feel safe, where you feel comfortable, all of those things. If you feel that way now, great. Grab a pen and a paper, and you're more than welcome to do it. If not, you can re-listen to the episode later and take the information from here. I will also provide the exercise in the description down below. The second thing is I want you to rewrite each one as if you were comforting a friend. So for example, if you wrote, I will never love again, I want you to rewrite it as, this feels hard right now, but love is out there and I am worthy of finding it. That subtle difference in how you approach yourself can make all the difference in the world, right? And you may not believe it right now, but I am telling you, as you continue to do this over a period of time, it absolutely works. Okay, so next thing here is building resilience, right? And listen, this is really where the work begins. Granted, it may feel like work the entire way through, but this is really where the work begins. Resilience isn't about just thinking positive thoughts. It's about taking action. And what I want you to do is I want you to start with small wins, right? So after a breakup, your world feels completely out of control. So focus on the things you can control. You know, maybe that's you getting back into the gym. Maybe that's you picking up a new hobby, or even throwing on a fresh coat of paint on the walls to change your environment. And the reason why I say this is not just because I'm telling you, oh, you need to do this to make yourself feel better because, you know, it's what worked for me. It did work for me, but this is also research backed, right? So research from the University of Pennsylvania shows that setting and achieving small goals can significantly boost your self-esteem. It's like giving your brain this like little high five every time you accomplish something. And again, I understand that depending on where you are at in this process emotionally, that may seem like the biggest crock of shit. I get it. But believe me when I tell you, even though it's going to be an adjustment, and even though you are used to speaking to yourself negatively, those little micro changes will make a big impact over an extended period of time, okay? Let's also talk about fitness for a second. No, I'm not saying that you need to have a breakup revenge body. I mean, if you want it, go for it, all about it, but exercise does wonders for your mental health. And a study that was published in the Journal of Psychiatric Research found that just 30 minutes of moderate exercise 3 times a week can reduce symptoms of depression by up to 50%. Plus, it is also a great way to channel some of that post-breakup energy. We are energetic beings. We are exchanging energy all the time. So when you are holding on to energy that is no longer serving you, it can make you feel like you are going crazy. So find activities, find things that you can do to get that energy out. Let's talk about the pitfalls, because trust me, we've all fallen into at least one of these at some point, right? So the first one here is the rebound trap. And what this is essentially is just jumping into something new before you have healed. And rebounds might feel good in the moment, trust me, but often they are just distractions from the real work that you need to do on yourself. The second thing here is a social media spiral. So if you are obsessing over your ex's posts, block them. Seriously. I'm telling you to block them, right? Studies have shown that Facebook stalking your ex can actually prolong heartbreak and make it harder to move on. The third thing here is over isolation, and it is easy to retreat into your shell after a breakup. A community is so important, right? So call your friends, join a support group, or even just book a session with a coach or a therapist if you are wanting to work through some of the emotions that you are feeling. I'd be more than happy to walk you through that. I have walked many people through that experience before, and sometimes you just need that extra support and that extra help, right? So surrounding yourself with positive influences reminds you that you are not alone in this experience. It can feel like a very isolating experience, but trust me when I tell you, it does not have to be that. I was there before. I get it. And my natural inclination is always to go internal so that I can do like a self-review, and then I put myself back out there. And when I experienced my breakup of my 13-year relationship breakup, I leaned into my friends, and it was probably one of the biggest blessings I could have ever had in that situation, because it really helped me to kind of navigate my emotions and my feelings and to see that I was not alone in that process. And finally, it is time to rewrite your breakup narrative. Too often, we frame breakups as failures. But what if instead you viewed it as a stepping stone, right? What did the relationship teach you about yourself? What qualities do you want in your partner that you didn't prioritize before? So here's what I want you to do. I want you to grab a journal, and I want you to answer these questions for me. If you don't have a journal right now, that is totally fine. Not a big deal. If you want to, again, rewatch the video when you have more time and write these questions down and spend some time answering, you can do that. I will also provide these questions for you in the description down below. So just check that out at the end of the video. Number one. And I got to think about this a little bit, because these are questions that I usually will ask my clients when we are working through these kinds of things, but I want to make sure that I'm framing it so that it is applicable. So number one is, what did I learn about myself in this relationship? Number two, what am I proud of from this relationship? What am I proud of? You know, I think so often we can focus on the negatives and the failures and the things that we didn't do. So what am I proud of? Number three, how will I show up differently in my next relationship? And this is such an important one, because so often we get stuck thinking about the past when we should be thinking more towards the future and the version of ourselves that we want to become. That being said, it is also important to remain in the present. To live in the present. So you are not always in the past, and you are not always in the future. I remember there's this saying, I can't remember exactly how it goes, but it says, if you're living in the past, you're depressed. If you're living in the future, you are anxious. And there is some truth to that. But there's also something to be said about planning ahead and wanting to improve yourself and what that looks like. Remember, every ending is also a beginning. And by reframing the breakup as part of your growth, you're not just rebuilding your confidence, you're also leveling up. And that's incredibly important, right? There was one specific bonus section that I wanted to add to this. And it's the why time doesn't heal all wounds theory. And again, listen to me. Everybody says time heals all wounds. And I believe that. I truly do believe that. But there's also something to be said about the opposite of that, right? So here's a little bonus insight to keep in your mind. Time alone does not heal all wounds. It's what you do with that time that matters. So think of it like this. You wouldn't sit in a messy room for months and expect it just to magically clean itself, right? And if it did, I'd be concerned. What's going on there? The same goes for emotional healing, right? You have to actively engage in the process for things to clear out. And in a study in the Journal of Emotion, it found that people who consciously reflect on their breakups and work through their feelings report significantly higher levels of personal growth and emotional recovery. So take the time to journal, to seek therapy or coaching, or to talk things out with someone you trust. Growth doesn't just happen. You make it happen. And if you're in this phase where you just feel stuck, remember this. It's okay to ask for help. Again, whether it's a coach, whether it's a therapist, whether it's a friend, a family member, a support group, whatever it is, you do not need to navigate this situation alone. The room is not going to clean itself. And it doesn't matter how much time goes by, the room will remain messy, if not get messier, if you don't put in some actionable steps to clean things up. So start cleaning some things up. All right. So let's recap. Rebuilding your confidence after a breakup starts with self-compassion. It builds resilience and grows by avoiding the pitfalls and reframing your narrative. And remember this, healing isn't passive, it's intentional. So if you found today's episode helpful, please share it with someone who you feel might need it. And do not forget to subscribe so you never miss out on an episode. You can also connect with me on Instagram or any of my other social media platforms. I will provide all the information in the description down below. And until next time, I want you to remember something. You are worthy of love. And it starts with loving yourself first. So take care, and I will see you next week.